Before I get started, I just want to give a huge thank you to all of my subscribers here on YouTube. Anyone who has watched a video, shared a video, liked the video, all of that really helps. And because of your continued support, my Rhinestone DIY bling kit is still one of my most successful products in my online store. I am very well aware that a lot of my traffic to my website comes from YouTube. So again, thank you guys so much. I try to update my videos in the comments or in the description to keep it up to date on what I still offer in my website, but I don't always get the chance to. So I am going to let you know now that as far as the full DIY bling kit, like the one that you see here, this is only going to be available in Crystal AB 4mm or 5mm. I've taken out the jet black, I've taken out the tanzanite, and I've also taken out the crystal. And that is because I find that most beginners who are like doing their first cup, they kind of stick to the Crystal AB. And then once they move on to, like, if it's someone who's a little more experienced, they really don't need the glue, they don't need a pen, the tweezers, like none of the extra stuff. They really just need the stones. So that is why I have begun to launch my light bling kit, which literally just includes the jar of stones for your main stone and then your filler tray. And that is going to be open to many different colors as I continue to increase the inventory that I offer. So if you do have any questions about the DIY bling kit or the light DIY bling kit, definitely feel free to shoot me any questions. All of my contact information is in the description below the video.
Soca sounds better when DJ Gel plays it.
So I am back again for another tutorial, and of course this is going to tie into jimming a tumbler. However, today we're actually going to keep a main focus on sizing your name decal for your tumbler. There are plenty of times when I'm asked on one of my tutorials, what size did I use for my decal? And unless I have the time to go back into my file and get the actual dimensions, I actually have to respond that I don't remember, what my exact size was, because there are plenty of factors that go into that. Not only is it the size of your tumbler, it's also the font that you're using. It also depends on the customer preference. And then it's going to depend on the aesthetic that you want that you feel is best for the tumbler. So you of course take the customer's wants into consideration, but you also have to take into consideration what will actually look nice on a tumbler. And I mean, do you want the decal to be straight from top to bottom, or do you want the decal to be at a diagonal angle because maybe the name is short, and something that is top to bottom with a short name won't look as good? So we're gonna jump right into this. Guys, I will be using Silhouette software. If you have Cricut, I am very sorry. I don't know that program or software, but I'm pretty sure that everything I do in Silhouette is available to be done in Cricut, except for the Conical warp. And the only reason I'm using the Conical warp today is because these tumblers are not perfectly straight. These do have a slight taper. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So this group of cups that I'm going to be working on is actually for a bridal party. It's for my friend's wedding. She is the bride, and these cups here is for her bridal party. They are 20-ounce acrylic matte tumblers that I got from AliExpress. I don't remember the name of the shop off the top of my head, but I will link it in the description below. They do have a slight taper. That is why I mentioned that I will be using the Conical warp tool from my Silhouette Design Studio. Now, the length of everyone's name in the bridal party is actually pretty long, so you will see me just use the names vertical from top to bottom. But when it comes to the orientation of the name on your tumbler, that's really going to be dependent upon the length of the name. What I have found in, growing and learning as a tumbler designer is that the shorter the name, it's actually best to have it either diagonal or horizontal on the cup. It just gives a better look. It's more aesthetically pleasing, and it's more aesthetically pleasing. I don't really know how else to describe that. Trying to have a short name just right here in the middle of the cup, vertical, it doesn't look as good. And I know that the Nikki cup that I did on the first tutorial was horizontal, but that's what happens when you are continuously trying to learn and get better in your craft. You learn what really works and what looks good. So just looking at these examples here, you see that I took the liberty of putting the name in the middle of the cup at a more horizontal or diagonal look. And I just feel that it just looks so much better. The customer agreed to it and definitely liked it. So that's my 2 cents on that as far as the orientation of the name. Now, getting into sizing your decal for your particular cup. No 2 decal sizes are going to be exactly the same. And that's because unless you're doing the exact same name and the exact same font, everything's going to change, right? So the first thing you'll do is remove your lid from your tumbler, and you're going to grab your tape. I prefer to use this type of measuring tape when working with tumblers, just because if I need to wrap it around, which we will need to do later, you won't have to, you can wrap it around. You don't have to deal with a straight ruler. So the first thing I do is, when looking at the cup, I like to make sure that there's about 1.5 inches from the top and 1.5 inches from the bottom of kind of blank space where the name will not enter, because I like to make sure that I can get at least 2 to 5 rows of straight stones before I have to deal with trying to fill in space around my decal. So I don't measure it, perfectly. I just kind of eyeball it. So I'll say I'll start here, and then I'll take the tape to the end, but I kind of just eyeball and see where am I comfortable with the blank space, and I'll probably go to about here. So just so you can see, from the beginning of the tape, my fingernail is on the 5.5 inch mark. So what that means for me in this particular cup, I'm not going to let any decal name that I do be any longer than 5.5 inches. And anything that I manipulate in my software, it's going to have to stay under 5.5 inches, right? So that's your length. And the next thing you're going to want to work on is your width. Now, again, when I'm working on my tumblers, when I'm looking at the tumbler, I don't want to have to go like this to read a name. I just don't like that look. I want you to be able to look at the tumbler and read everything that you need to read. So I'll just measure and see what looks best for me. And when I'm looking at the tumbler, I would say 3 inches. I would say I wouldn't let anything be longer than 2.75. I wouldn't let anything be longer than 2.75 inches. I feel like at 2.75 inches, that is, yep, I think that's a good look. Everything needs to be within 2.75 inches. And when I say everything, I'm talking about everything that needs to be legible. So the particular font that I'm using for this project, it has flourishes. And If a flourish is outside of my 2.75-inch threshold, that is perfectly fine. If it can be inside of it and everything doesn't look, you know, smushed down together, then great. But I just want what I need to be for sure red inside that 2.75-inch threshold. So we have 5.5 inches by 2.75. Don't let your tape go too far. We are going to need this later when we need to measure the entire tumbler, because I will be using the conical warp feature because this cup has a slight taper. Welcome to Silhouette Studio Business Edition. Now, if you are a Cricut user, or if you do not have either the business or design edition of Silhouette, this might all look confusing to you. However, my point of this video is not to go over how specifically to use Silhouette Studio. If you need that, my suggestion would be to do a search through either Google or YouTube. There are a plethora of resources available that can tell you how to use each and every tool that is available to you in the business edition of Silhouette Studio. Now, before I get into the making up the decals for my actual cups, I just want to let you know that I actually do have two different files that I use when it comes to making my decals. The first one that I typically use is this one here. It might look a little confusing to you, but to me it's not. This large section that you see over here, it is actually all of the decals that I've done. And this is mostly for cups where it's an epoxy style cup. And it actually doesn't include everything I've done. I kind of just recently got into the habit of just keeping it here just in case. This section over here is where I actually edit as I'm working on a project. So if a customer comes to me and says, hey, can you put my name on my cup? And this is for an epoxy style cup. Even for a rhinestone cup, I'll typically just come in here. These are the fonts that I like to use. These would be the script fonts that I like to use. And these would be the, I guess, regular typing style fonts. And I like to give my customers 3 script and 3 regular, because you never know what kind of style that they like. So I do like to give options. You just don't want to overwhelm them with options. There are a lot of people who don't like being given too much to choose from. It overwhelms them. But I find 3 of each is typically good. And like 9 times out of 10, they'll pick from that first round that you give them. I've literally only had one person ask for additional choices, and I think they ended up picking from the first batch anyways. So this is where I do a majority of choosing fonts to give to the customer. Then what I'll do for rhinestone cups specifically is I'll come over into this file and I will just deal with everything here. Now, for the purpose of my project today, I've actually made a separate file for them, or for her, because I do like to organize and keep, most of the time when it's a large order like this, I like to organize and keep everyone in their own file. If it's just one person ordering one cup, I'll just drop everything in here. These were the 2 fonts that I typically like to use on cups because they have a good thickness when it comes to like their style. It's not very feasible to choose a font style that has very thin lines, because when you're cutting it out in the vinyl, you can run into some issues. And then as you can see here, I put offset 0.015. That's because I always give an offset to my fonts. It does not matter whether it is already thick or whether it is thin. I always give an offset. And then I actually go in and I check and see how thick the letter is before I print it off. So that's just the background on that. Now we can jump into what we're actually working on. So these are the names. And like I said, I already told you guys, like this is a cup with a lot of flourishes on the letters. It is a script, and as you can see, it's very thin. It has a lot of thin lines, and we're going to add an offset to quote unquote fix that. So let us start with Janae, right? Because Janae is the smallest, and then we'll do Christina. When you're working, let me hide the grid right quick. When you're working in Silhouette Studio and you're working with fonts and you have chosen the font that you want, especially when it's a script or any type of connecting letters, you need to make sure that you weld those letters together before you do any type of manipulation, because you will run into issues. The way you can tell whether this is an object or if you're still in writing is if you're typing a name, most times the software won't recognize it as a word. So they'll give you that little line there. That's how you can tell, hey, I'm still working in, I guess, the font word type of thing. I need to change this to a welded object. So you'll just click on it. Welding is this right here. You can kind of tell that it's welding because you have the square welded onto the circle, but you just weld it. And now you saw that it changed from this one object, which is the J, and then this object, which is the ANEE. And by welding it, it did exactly what it did. It connected the ANEE. The next thing you'll want to do is group these two items. That would be here. And now this is all one thing, and you'll work on it as one entity, so to speak. So I'm just going to zoom in here. And I did not realize I'm actually working in millimeters. Oops. I am going to change it back over to millimeters later, but for right now, I just want to work in inches. So I'm going to go into my settings and change that back, because inches is what I know for my cup. Now, if you remember, I said that for the inches, we're not going to go any longer than 5.5 to 5.75. I actually don't remember. I think 5.5, that sounds reasonable. So I remember we said we're not going to go any longer than 5.5, and we're not going to go any wider than 2.75. But as you can see here, without doing any type of manipulation or adding the offset yet, we're at 3.5 by 1.7. So if we make this bigger, and dragging from the corner, you don't want to drag from the side or the top because that'll just skew it. Dragging it from the corner will make it bigger in all directions. So if you just drag it from the corner, we're going to see how big it is at 5.5. So we are at 5.5, and the top is at 2.641. That is actually perfect because it falls within what I needed it to. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this and we're going to add our offset. Offset is this kind of double star here. It brings up your offset menu, and without changing anything, we definitely still want to keep our corners rounded. The only thing we're going to change is the distance. So 0.015, the same way it said on the other sheet. You'll click here just so you can, because it applies it temporarily. Like, I don't want to hit apply yet because I don't know if this is what I want. Even though just looking at it now, it looks fine to me. Nothing is out of order. So I'll go ahead and apply that. After you apply that, you need to reselect everything and then weld it again. So what that does is that welds your offset to your original object, and now you have this object. And then because when you welded it, it split the ANEE, because when you offset it, it split the ANEE again from the J. Just go ahead and select everything and group it. So we're now at 5.5 0.566 inches by 2.671. We're still within our parameters. This actually looks pretty good as far as thickness for my rhinestones. The only one that I want to check is this one right here. I want to see how thick that is to see like how small of a stone I'm really going to be using on her name. So that is why I typically will go back into my settings and switch back over to millimeters. And what I'll do is I will zoom in right here. I want to get as close as possible. We're going to change to our line tool, and I will go as straight as possible. You can make sure you go straight by holding down your shift key if you are a Windows user. I don't know the command on Apple, I apologize. So I drew that line basically from this side to this side, and I wanted to make it straight because if it's diagonal, it'll mess up what you're trying to do. And so I can see that this is going to be, it says 1.344 millimeters. I believe that 1.3 millimeters is that SS? That'll probably be an SS3 or SS4. I actually don't know off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure it's SS4, but my main concern is just to make sure that this line is thick enough for a rhinestone. I don't want to cut this out on my vinyl and it be too thin. So this actually looks perfect. And if that's the smallest, 1.34, I know that the rest is going to be just fine. So I'm going to go back out to the whole sheet, and Janae is done. Let me change this back to inches. I'm trying to teach my mind like the metric system, but it hasn't all clicked yet. So just gonna go with what I know by default. Okay, so Janae's name looks fine. What I'm going to do now, what I always like to do, because the measurements that you see here, they're fine, but sometimes it's not always perfect. Like you see that little gap of space there, a little gap of space on each side. I like to double check what I'm seeing here. So what I'll do is I'll put my grid back on. I'll match up the ends. So what I'm doing here is I'm matching up the end of the J and the bottom of the J exactly on a line. And then I'll kind of just count myself. So from the beginning of the J, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, it is a little over 5.5. And then from the bottom of the J, 1, 2, 2.5, almost 2.75. So what that means is this is fine. the dimensions that I'm seeing here is fine. And then this, again, it fits within my parameters. So Janae is done. The next one I'm going to show you is Christina, because she has the longest name. So let's see how we have to do this one. So let me turn off the grid. And remember, again, we're working with scripts. So you have to remember to weld. And let me show you why that's important. So this is the Christina font. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset the Christina font without welding. And I'm going to bring it all the way down. So looking at this, you can immediately see the difference in how it offset Janae to how it offset Christina. Because you can see right here and right here, that is where the cursive of the letters are basically running into each other. So this is the R, and the R actually stops here, and the I begins here, and then it goes like that. I don't know where it is on the S and the I. I'm assuming it's somewhere in here. So the S and T, S stops here, T begins here, and that's why you see that overlap, right? So that is why you have to weld before you do anything, any type of customization to your font. Let's go ahead and cancel that. Weld everything together. Group it all in one just so that nothing gets missed, just in case we have to grab anything. Sorry, forgot the word I was looking for. Now, looking at this one, we can see that the length is 4.8 inches and the width is 1.5. The 1.5, it seems a little small to me. If you do, I know you can't see me doing it, but I'm just going to measure the cup real quick to see what 1.5 inches would look like. 1.5 inches on the cup is very thin. I don't like how that looks, but let's see what it looks like when I bring this out to 5.5 inches. Can't count. 5, and it doesn't have to be perfect, just 5.5 is fine. So now we're at 1.74 inches, which is basically 1 inch and 3/4. Only 1/4 of an inch difference. I'm still not in love with it. So what I might do, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to make this a bit taller. I'm going to bring this to 2 inches. And I think 2 inches will be fine. What I don't want to do, I'm not going to try and force it to be I had to zoom out there. I'm not going to force it to be the 2.75 inches, because if I do that, let me show you. This is what it will look like if I force it out to the 2.75 inches. And as you can see, it's very skewed. It's too tall. It does not look right. It's when you put it on the cup, it'll look like you had to take the font and actually smush it together on the sides. It won't look like you stretched it tall. It will, but it looks like you had to kind of smush it together to fit on the cup, and you don't want that look for the cup. It just doesn't look good. You want it to look as natural as the cups that are going to be next to it. And granted, the cups aren't going to be near each other all the time, but still, this is going to be presented as a set. I can only assume that pictures are going to be taken. You have to take all of that stuff into consideration. So 5.5 by 2, I think this looks good. We are now going to offset it. And we're going to keep the offsets uniform because, again, this is being presented as a group. Now, when you're doing your offsets, one thing that you want to make sure of and keep an eye on is the loops, and then where lines are touching each other, especially because, well, hers isn't going to have it. Hers isn't going to have filler stones around the name. We're just putting the stones on the name, so I kind of dodged a bullet with this one. But when doing scripts on rhinestone tumblers, you kind of have to be careful about this space right here where my mouse is, because your stones only go but so small. And if you don't properly, put a background color behind your cup or any of that stuff, you'll end up with this really thin space where you cannot fit any stones. That's why you have to pay very close attention to the types of fonts that you're offering to your customer when you give them font choices for a rhinestone tumbler. And let me apply this, apply my offset, and then remember to grab everything, weld it together, and group it, right? Let me just jump over to something right quick. So this cup here that I did for American Wines Matter, she wanted this font and she wanted a pink offset. So This was the white, where you see the white was the crystal stones, and then she wanted a pink offset around the what's it called? Around the letters. So what originally happened was, and let me pull this up. I should have it. If I don't, I'm gonna be a little bit upset. There it is. Ah. So what I did is I showed her a different mock-up with each offset. And so the problem with this one became trying to get stones down in this area, right? And I told her that. I was very upfront. I was like, we can do this offset, however, trying to get stones down here, it might not work. And so you might end up with just space that has black spray paint and no stones. This one, I mean, it would have been fine, but it's kind of bubbly to me. I just offered it because, again, I wanted to give her an option. This is the one that we went with, obviously, because that's the one you saw in the file. But it made it easier for me. Of course, no, I won't be able to get a stone right there at the end, but because of where I can bring the stones down in this area, this one is a lot easier to work with, right? So these are things that you have to pay attention to when you're working on, when you're offering fonts to your customers. So back to the wedding cups. So this is Christina's cup. We are at 5.6 inches by 2. I would feel more comfortable if this said 5 point something. So I'm just going to bring it down to 5.5 just for my brain. And then by 2 inches, I think that this works fine. And as you can see, like it looks like Janae's name is bigger, and I guess it kinda is, but I think it's honestly just as flourish here, because if I put them on top of one another, they're really about the same. But remember what I said, so Janae's name is smaller, so her whole name was able to fit within the thresholds that I set for myself. But remember what I was saying, I don't care if the flourish is outside of the threshold. It's more so about the name. I need this part here to be legible. So that was the main thing with Christina. Christina's name needed to be within the threshold, but because her name is so much longer, we had to kind of make it a little bit taller and, you know, make sure it fits. But these names, when you're looking at the cups, it'll be fine. So, Christina, Janae, yes, you can do 2 at a time. You can do more than one. You just don't want to do too much, because I don't know if it's my computer or if it's just Silhouette in general. It might cause your system to slow down. But I guess you don't want to do 2 at a time, because you got to make sure that it's the proper sizing, right? So we are going to weld it, group it. This is almost 4 inches by 1.75. So at 5.5 inches, my name goes to 2.5 inches. That works. You know what I'm now realizing? I'm going to have to adjust all of these, because I need to add their respective titles. But that can be done later. So let's offset this. 0.015, apply it, highlight it, weld it and group it. And I'm just going to speed this up here because you really don't need to. I'm doing the same thing over and over again. So they want to see me, they want to see me, they want to see me do me thing. They want to see me, they want to see me. I did not have this part ready. Bridesmaid. Maid of honor. Bride. So that's actually very important because it ties into fitting within my 2.7 inch wide threshold, right? So let me, so when I know I'm not going through my steps and I do apologize. Basically go to your text tool, you type about, you press the thing, it comes up with a thing, you type. When you come off of it, if you hold your Alt key, you see how the arrow kind of changes. If you're holding your Alt key when you go over an object, you just grab the object and it duplicates it. So that's what I was doing when I did these. Then you can just double click, Control A to highlight all the text and change it to whatever you want. And then when I'm working on fonts, I don't like to look at it like this. So I will select my item. I'll go over here. This is where you select your fill color, and I'll just change it to black. And then for the outline color, this is really basically showing what will be cut, like what will be cut. I really don't need it because I don't want this to show thicker than it actually is, and having that little bit of black just shows it thicker, and I don't want that. So this is actually one of the hardest parts of designing, I would think, is choosing a font. It is yeah. So hers is 5 inch by 1.657. If I bring it out to, sorry, I'm talking to myself. Let me speak a little louder. So hers was 5 inches by 1.6 inches. If I bring it out to 5.5 inches, it's only at 1.852. So I'm going to do the same thing with hers that I did to Christina's, and I'm going to make it a little bit taller. I'm gonna stop at 2 inches because I could see already if I did too much, it's not gonna look good. So 2 inches. And Shabby is the bride. Now what I do know is that when you're working with fonts, it doesn't look aesthetically pleasing when you put two scripts next to each other. And I guess it really depends on the type of script, because if it's a handwritten that's not necessarily cursive, then you could get away with it depending on what fonts you're using. But my point of having these, my point of having these was to just, label the cups without it just being their name. I want it to be known that these cups were specifically for Shabby's wedding. So this is going to be significantly smaller. The only thing is I hadn't quite figured out where I wanted to put this on everyone's cup, and that is because not everyone's name is the same. Christina's is easy because hers is kind of it's almost flat. I'll probably put hers here, Chanel's here, Janae's here, and I wish it could all be uniform. The problem is 1, 2, 3, 4. So mine, Tiffany's, Steffi's, and Shabby's. We all have something that dips below the line here. And Shabby's could be easy. Her own could go right here. Mine, I'll probably try and fit under the E's, which means that my name would actually have to get smaller because as a, I mean, it's Bridesmaid, so the name is kind of long. Tiffany's, I honestly don't know where to put Tiffany's because she's the maid of honor. So her title is much longer, and what to do? I should have had this prepared, but I didn't. Steffion, I don't know where to put hers either. She might have to do what I'm doing and have it like under here, but again, that makes the name smaller or shorter. Okay, so picking a font for this. So when you select this, if you go over and choose your texting toolbox, it brings up your texting panel, and then you can choose your font. I don't know if there's a way to do it. I wish there was, to like choose to only see the scripts or to only see serifs or sans serifs or whatever, but you don't have that here. But you do have, it kind of shows a sample. So I hope I can find this quickly while I have you guys. I don't like the default font. I want something pretty. What do I have over here? What's this? This is Poor Richard. I don't know. It's not horrible, but I'm not a fan. This is Maheto. Nope, don't like that one. I am so sorry. I was not ready and prepared with this. That is not cool. Ugh, I don't like any of these. I most likely won't like this one. Lucida. Right, yeah, I don't like it. All right, so you guys go ahead and enjoy this soca music while I pick a font. Yes, they come from you. Hey, but we was young and we didn't know what real love was all about. Oh, yeah. And then you went away and I went away. Coconut boy, coconut girl, now that we big, I want to give you my jelly, jelly, jelly. I want to give you my jelly, jelly, jelly. Coconut boy, meet me under the tree where we used to be. Jelly. Okay, so I've picked my font. Kind of one of my favorite fonts. So I'm choosing this font. This is Caviar Dreams. Let me, because I know you guys are gonna ask, or I know someone's gonna ask. Oh man, I hope it doesn't take me long to find this. Right. The font of these names is called Aston Script Bold. I most likely got it off of, sorry, my chair's a little squeaky. I most likely got it off of DaFont. So Aston Script Bold. Anyways, so this font, it is, I'm gonna have to offset it because it's a very thin font, and I know if I try and cut this on vinyl as it is, it's going to give me plenty of problems. So I wanted something that was not very old school, like, you know, Times New Roman looking. I did not want a serif font. I knew I wanted sans serif. I needed something that was simple but still kind of like feminine and nice, so I just stuck with this font. her title it fits just fine under her name. Her name is at, her actual name is at 5.5 by 2. And adding in her title brings it at 5.5 by 2.4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on her title. I am going to offset it. Cancel. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, this might not be a what's it called, a script, but I guess just by what I just did, you can't just offset a font. So what you can do is go to Object, and you're going to convert to path. That's basically just going to make it a regular item. So now when I offset, you can see that it will look normal. You want to make sure that because the font has hard corners, make sure that your offset sticks to the hard corners. Look at the D or the E. Just look at one of the points on here. I'm going to switch back and forth between curved and straight. And you can see it might be a subtle difference, but it is a difference nonetheless, and you don't want to take, I don't want to take away from this font. I like the hard edges of the font. So that's that. We're going to apply it, weld it, group everything together, and then I'm going to do my whole check the width thing, because I need to make sure that the offset that I put made this thick enough. I think I want to use at least, if I can get it up to SS6 without it looking too weird, then that's what I want to do. So I don't like what I'm seeing. It looks like I see a 1.4 or 1.5, and I want this at a 2 because SS6 is closer to 2 millimeters. So yes, this is at 1.45. That means this is 0.5 millimeters short. So I would want to offset, that is what, 0.25 millimeters? I don't know if I'm mathing correctly. So let's try. Let's 2 millimeters. No. I hope this works. Apply it, weld it. Ooh, it looks so thick. If it's so much larger than 2, I'll actually be a little bit upset. Oh, undo. 1.98, yay! Okay, so that is that. I'll have to go through the process of doing the first offset and the second offset separately, because I don't know the conversion for that. But okay, back out a little bit. Oops, this is why you group everything, right, Angee? Okay, so her name is going to go here, her title, excuse me. And I just need this to be in inches. And her whole thing, including her title and her name, we're at 5.5 by 2 inches. And I think that works just fine. And I don't really want to go beyond that. And hers is going to... Ooh, this should be fun, because her entire cup is being covered. Ooh, this should be really fun. Yeah, so let's just group that. I'm not touching that anymore. I'm going to take this. Okay, so Steffi's, because mine and hers is going to be trying to do the same thing, and that is putting the bridesmaid on the end. So again, I know you can't see me, but I am measuring the cup, the whole cup. And if I start the name, give it about a couple rows, right? I really don't want to go all the way to the end. Pushing it 6 inches is really pushing it, but you can try for 6 inches. So what I'll have to do is I don't want to manipulate this all after I've already stretched that, so I'm gonna type another one for bridesmaid. We're going to make it black. Remove that. Change the font. Caviar Dreams. Delete this one. We are going to convert both of these to paths. And then we're going to do the whole offset thing. Apply and weld and group. Same thing with this one. Offset 0.015. Hard corners. Apply. Highlight everything. Oh, we didn't highlight everything. Let's try that again. Highlight everything. Weld and group. And then we're going to change this over to millimeters so that we can apply a second offset at 0.25 millimeters. Hard lines. Apply, offset, group, not offset, weld, sorry. Now we offset at 0.25, hard corners, weld it, and group. All right, so change this back to inches. We're now going to make this small. .6, that is still a bit too big. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take Steffi's name. I'm going to make Steffi's name smaller. So I can bring bridesmaid over. We are now within the 6.45 inches by 2.063 inches. I think that is fine. This looks significantly smaller than that. So I have a feeling that it is. So let's zoom in. If you don't know what this tool is right here, you can choose the area where you want to zoom in instead of just these, which make it a general zoom in. So when you select this tool and drag it over what you want to look at, it brings that right front and center. And I just want to see what kind of thickness we're looking at with bridesmaid. Oh, it looks like 1.2 millimeters. Wow, 1.26 millimeters. So the question is, do I want to make that thicker? Or do I want to leave it as is? I might actually want to leave that as is. Let me check give me a second. I'm going to check my handy dandy cheat sheet on rhinestone sizes. 1.26. Oh, that's like SS3. It's really small. If I could get that to at least like a SS5, or SS4, I'd be very happy. Keep in mind, these titles are going to change with each name. I should have done like a simpler project. Oh, instead of dragging you guys through all this. But let's offset it again. It was at 1.2 something. So that would be 0.75, and 0.75 divided by 2, 7, 4, 3, 7, 0.75. No, yeah, well, 0.75. 7 is 3.5, so if we add 0.4, so add 0.2 millimeters. Apply. Weld. Group. Okay, so 1.5 will get me up to at least 4, SS4 in size. I think I can deal with that. All right, so Steffi, SS4. Oh, I really wish I knew conversions. It didn't change. Did I do something wrong? 6.45. That is not horrible. I guess I can deal with that. So Steffi is done. I'm going to grab Bridesmaid. Group that together, and we'll do Janae's. Janae's is going to make my life so much easier. So, because Steffi's is like that, I kind of want to make this one like that. So now I'm stepping outside my threshold with all of them. Boo. I don't want to bring it over too much. So 6.2. I am measuring on the cup. I know you can't see me. Okay. I can deal with it. I can deal with it. I could just make everything smaller. 6 inches. I think that makes me a little bit happier. So let me grab this. Group this. If you don't know, Control G, that is also a way to group your items, because I just grouped Janae and Bridesmaid, but I can't move it for some reason. That doesn't make any sense. That's really weird. I was trying to grab Janae and it won't let me grab any of it, but I can move Bridesmaid. I won't ask questions. Christina. Christina's easy. How much? That's important. Well, I'll keep it like that because it keeps it within. Christina's and Janae's are both within, or like only a little over 6 inches. So just bring it down a little bit. Okay, cool. Chanel, make her name bigger. Bring it out to 5.5. Her name is at about 2 inches. I can make it a little bit bigger. Just so that it kind of fits as far as the height of everyone else's. Bridesmaid. I can do hers at 6 inches as well. 5.961. Come on. It might look weird. I'm gonna just bring hers over. So the thing is, right, I want these to kind of look as uniform as possible. Again, I understand they're not going to be next to one another all the time. However, I want them to look uniform. So how Christina's doesn't have a lot of space between where her name ends and where bridesmaid ends. Same with Janae's. I want to keep Chanel's at that. And although her L ends all the way over here, this part of the L ends here, and I don't want it to be like I'm doing it like this simply so I can get it out to 6 point whatever inches. I kind of want to keep it uniform. So the way her E ends above the A next to the I, again, A above the A next to the I want her L part to end above the A next to the I. So Chanel's is going to be like that, which keeps it at the 5.5 inch length, but that's perfectly fine by me. So we are going to group these two. I really hope that this does not give me issue when I go to print this. I mean, cut this. All right, my name was put at its length. Yikes. Right? Yeah, yikes. So I'm going to make my name smaller. .321. Where was Steffi's at? Steffi's was at 6.458. Okay, so that means that I can bring mine to about 6.5 inches also, because my name was looking a little scrunched. I don't like that look. It doesn't look good to me. And because this font is meant to be, you know, exaggerated to the right, I don't want to change that up too much. So if what is this? This is 6.372, which is not bad at all. Total height is at this would technically be the width, but total height is at 2.44, which is actually not bad. So we're going to group these. Oops. Group that, and then Tiffany's Made of Honor. Hers, it has to go like this. Because I want to be consistent with the look of the title under the name. Of course, it would definitely be easier to put her name up here. I mean, put her title up here. But I don't want that. I could honestly do it with everyone. Steffi's, Shabby's, and Chanel's would give issues, so I don't want to do that. All right, so Maid of Honor. I'm going to position it here. Ooh. Ooh, okay. So the height or the width is at 2.8 inches, which is just barely outside of my threshold, so I'm not really too worried about that. But I don't really feel it's necessary for hers to be this wide or this long. But her name is at 5.5 inches. 6.2. That's fine. That's fine, that's fine. 6 inches, 6 inches, 5.5 inches, and I remember why. 6.37, 6.5, 6.2, 5.5. Oh, if she didn't have this here, I would honestly try and I would move bride this way. But the consensus between myself and the only other person who knows I'm doing this cups is that she would prefer her nickname rather than her government name. So 6.32, and then I just need, the only thing I didn't do was check the thickness of her lines. .6. I can see it. I'll move it so you guys can see it, but I can see it. 1.63. That's not horrible. So I can deal with that. And we'll leave it as is. This button here, where it's blue, this brings you out to the default, I guess, zoomed view of your window. So you just click that. It'll bring you all the way out to your default. So just so I can see everything, I zoomed it out one more time. And that is that. So as you can see, working on this project with multiple names, it might all be the same font, which made it, I guess, I had no reason to explain like different fonts and different lengths and stuff like that. But you saw how it was dealing with different lengths of names in the same font that need to be within the same threshold. So that is how you ended up with my name. And I know adding this in makes it a little bit different, but you saw when I was dealing with my name and how I couldn't adjust it too much, because if I did, my name became too smushed together. You saw with Christina's name, because her name is so long. So you saw with Christina's name, because her name is so long, it kind of automatically fit within the threshold of the length, but you had to make it a little bit taller so that it didn't look, so that it wasn't too small by default. Because by default, this is actually a little bit shorter. You remember we made this a little bit taller so that it could reach up to 2 inches and still look good on the cup. And then, of course, Janae's name, hers being the shortest, excuse me. With Janae's name, hers being the shortest out of the bunch. But the length of her name is really more so in her flourish, right? So we dragged it out. We made it the size that it needed to be. And it looks big. It looks huge. However, it's more so her flourish than anything. But remember, the focus that we are trying to make when it comes to putting the name on the cup is that it fits within what needs to be legible, which is the, honestly, with her name, it's the A-N-E-E, because the J is kind of, how the J is positioned next to the A-N-E-E, it's kind of implied. Like you see it, but you don't need to see the whole thing. You need to make, you can assume the J, and you need the A-N-E-E, so that you know that it's Janae on the whole. So my next step here, everything's grouped so I can move everything how I want it to. My next step here is to cut this out. Yes, everything you see here is in black, but Shabby's name is actually going to be cut out in silver because she is going to have crystal stones on her navy blue cup. And then everyone else's names are going to be cut out in navy blue because I'm going over their names in navy blue. And by doing it in their respective colors, it just helps fill in any type of gap that I may have. So this is actually going to be interesting to see how it cuts because, yeah, I'll do hers first. Oops. Forgot to group it. This will be interesting to see how it cuts because it may look big on here, but it's actually pretty small. So the titles might give issue when it comes to cutting. And now you can watch my cups go from this to this. Why am I showing you this picture? Because I want you guys to know that I literally print, like I literally cut everything out, weeded everything. I applied the transfer tape, was ready to put it on the cup, and then I realized I forgot to warp the names. So let's go back and warp the names. And just to let you know, everything weeded perfectly. Like everything is a very nice size for weeding. I need to learn how to trust my steps more often. I mean, that's why I do the offset, so I don't have to have issues when I'm weeding. But let's jump back into Silhouette and get these warped real quick so I can cut them again. Okay, so we are back inside of Silhouette. This is how I had everything set when I cut them. I cut these names separate from Shabby, of course, because these were all in the same color. So I'm going to do Shabby first, and we're going to leave it grouped because we want everything to warp the same. I've already measured my cup. If you have the measuring tape that I showed you earlier, I believe it's like a seamstress tape or whatever. If you have that kind of tape, what I do is I measure, let me draw something like this, right? And let me hide the grid behind it so you can see it a little better. Right, so pretend this is your tumbler. And with these particular tumblers, I measured without the lid on. But anyways, first you measure the height, right? So that's going to be from the top to the bottom. Next, you're going to, what I do is I measure the circumference of the top. The actual measurement that you need is the diameter, which is the length from one side to the other. But even though it's a circle, I don't know for sure if I am measuring from the center of one side to the center of another. So what I find easier for me is to take my seamstress tape, wrap it around the mouth of the tumbler, the very, very top. I make sure it's flush with the top, and I get my measurement. And then the way to find the diameter from that measurement is to take that number and divide it by pi. You can just take the number, put it in your calculator, and in your calculator on your phone, you should be able to pull up I guess a condensed version of a scientific calculator, and you can just hit the pi button instead of doing 3.14. Because I'm pretty sure the pi button gives you like 3.14 or number, because you know that's like a never-ending whatever. So I do that the same with the top and the bottom because it is a tapered cup and you're going to have different measurements, right? So inside your Silhouette Business Edition Studio, you're going to highlight the item that you're needing to warp. Your warp panel, if you come down here, right above your settings, there is an arrow to bring up the rest of what can't fit on the side here. Your warp panel looks like this. It's a grid that looks warped. And you're going to go over here where it looks like a cup. This is your conical warp. And you're going to select conical warp selected shapes. So this is what's selected. That's what it's going to warp. Ooh, before you do that, turn this on its side. That's important. All right. So we're going to conical warp the shapes. My diameter for the top is 2.825. My diameter for the bottom is 2.566. The height of my cup is 7 5/8, which is 625. I keep that sticky note on my computer because I don't know those numbers off the top of my head. Okay, so you can see how it's warped. You'll use these to move it, to make it bigger. And then what this does, if I can get it to show, it's not showing because this is outside of the thing. Oh, come on. There it is. This moves it up and down, right? So we got up and down, big and small. So I'm going to make sure that this stays, I forget the dimensions Shabby had. Do I want it that big? I don't think I want it that big. We'll bring hers down. What I'm looking at is the dimensions here and the dimensions here. think that's fine. I really just want it centered. And again, these dimensions that I used is for the cup without the lid. But I think that's good. So we're going to apply. And then before you move it, group it, because it ungrouped everything. And now we have Shabby's warped name. What I'm going to do on the next one, because the change is so subtle, but I promise you it makes a difference. I did it for one of the shorter names, but it was on a dome tumbler, and those are like more significantly tapered. And even though it was a short name and it was going in the middle of the cup, it made a complete difference on how it looked on the cup. So I want to see if I can tell the difference. So I'm going to make a duplicate of this one. I want to see if we can tell the difference when after we warp this. So again, we're going to conical warp. Our numbers are 2.825, 2.566, 7.625, move the name up, to about the middle of the cup. 2.2, 4.92, 4.69, that's not, excuse me, 5.69, that's not bad. 2.294, I think that's good. And it's about the center. I'm really eyeballing this. I'm not trying to get perfect on finding the distance between here and here. I don't need that to be perfect. I just want this to be as close as possible. So we're going to apply, group it, turn this one back, and let me see if there's any difference in how, if you can really see how it looks. This is warped, this is unwarped. I can see it. So what's happening is, how big is this one? This was 2.5 by 6. This is 2.25 by 5.7. Let me bring that out. I'm just backing up till before I while it was still being warped. I just want to make it a little bit bigger. Apply. Group it. Yeah, I can definitely see it, and I'm going to show you, if you can't see it, I'm going to show you where the difference is. 2.5 by 6, 2 and 2.3 by almost 6. But what so you see how straight and across this is? If you look closely, you can tell that this is kind of coming down into a bit of a cone shape. And that is the point of the conical warp, because when you look at it on the cup, you won't see that it's getting smaller. It'll actually look like it is all one size. So that's the point of the conical warp, so that you get that illusion. This type of thing also helps with when you're trying to put shapes, and technically this is a shape, but when you're trying to put shapes on a warped cup. So like, say if you were trying to put a circle, like this is your tumbler over here, right? So say you're trying to put a circle on your tumbler, and because your tumbler tapers, when you try to put just a regular flat circle, it doesn't look right. Once you warp it, it helps you not only get the circle on the cup easier, it actually retains, oddly enough, it retains the shape of, it retains the look of a circle once you put it on the tumbler. So that is that. I'm just gonna go through and get all of these done, and then when you're doing what I did, because I cut and then had to go back, just make note of what your dimensions are before you do the warp, so that you can make sure that you're keeping those dimensions, because as you saw, once I did the warp, it made it a bit smaller than I wanted. So because I didn't remember what I had said before. So let me get this done. So I am holding my phone here, so I apologize for any shakiness. You will notice that Shabby's cup is scuffed. If you remember, I said in the beginning, her whole cup is going to be blinged. So I just scuffed it up a little bit. I think the sandpaper I used was like a 320, but I scuffed it up a little bit in preparation for the rest of the stones that will be covering her cup. Everyone else's cup, I actually just wiped it down with alcohol. I would have much preferred to use acetone. However, I don't know how acetone will affect this plastic. So everything else is just wiped down in acetone. I am now going to add the stones, and you guys will be able to see the finished product. So these are the cups all done in their entirety. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Let's take a look at Shabby's first, because hers, of course, is the full bling one. So I did everything, right? So I did the inside of the lid, the outer rim of the lid, and of course the entire cup. Now, what I should have known and did learn in making this tumbler is that it's not always good to buy your stones from two different suppliers. So this color stone is called Montana. Hopefully I'll be able to bring that into my shop sometime later this year. But I bought my stones from my original supplier. And then, of course, after I got the stones is when I decided to do the whole of Shabby's cup. So I had to buy the rest of my stones from Amazon, and because that is essentially two different batches from what might be two different suppliers, I got two different navy blues. And you may not be able to tell it in the video because it kind of all flows together, but I can see it on the cup because I can tell the difference. So just let that be a lesson to you when you are buying your stones. Make sure you do get them all at once, so that you don't have to deal with any difference in coloring. But this is Shabby's cup. The name is done in crystal, as well as the title. And then, as I said, the rest of the cup is Montana. I didn't have to use as many fillers throughout the body as I thought. I did have to use a few, but because the taper is so minimal, a lot of the times I was able to just kind of manipulate it so that I could just use as many SS16s on the body as possible. And then for the names, I'll go ahead and use mine. For the names, now typically what I might do is, especially for like this area here, my camera wouldn't focus, but especially for like bigger areas here and like along here, I'll typically use two different sizes to kind of fill in the space, but I wanted to stick with a general theme, so I just used whatever size would fit. A lot of the thin lines and a majority of these names, and especially the titles, used SS6. So I actually bought 2 bags of SS6 in anticipation of needing a lot of them for these names, and I only went through 1 bag. And it's 1 10 gross bag, so that's 1,440 stones. So that lets you know how far 1 bag can get you, because the entirety of the titles on everyone's, all of that is SS6. lines that look like this, and as you can see, there are a lot of them. That's all SS6. I only use maybe like a handful of SS20, but the sizes all range from SS3 to SS20, as I did the names here. So that is that. And funny story, I kid you not, and I'll show you the screenshot right here. I had someone posted on Facebook, and they were like, so what are you working on? And I replied in a comment that I was working on finishing these cups. And wouldn't you know it, someone asked, what is the size of the font? And I just thought it was so funny that I'm actually using these cups to explain, you know, sizing your decal, because as I told her in my response, there's no actual size of the font. It's the size of the object, and it also includes the title. So say if I take Steffi's cup, and just looking at the name, say if I take Steffi's cup and put it next to Christina's, two completely, let me put it on top, two completely different sizes in just the name alone, right? So if you're looking at the name and the title, you might say, okay, they're both around 6 or 6 1/4 inches or something like that. And they're somewhere around 2.5 inches wide. But the name itself, Steffi's name is shorter. So if I were to just do this by size and say, let's make Steffi's name size 120 point, and Christina's name size, if I try to put Christina's name size at 120 point, it wouldn't look right. So that's why it's really is a complicated question. It's not complicated, but it's a more in-depth question or in-depth answer when someone asks, what size is your font? You know what I'm saying? And then the other thing that I realized as I was working on this is why you do the what's the word? Bring it back. The conical warp. As I was working, I realized, so the reason that you do that is to keep everything straight, right? You warp the image to keep everything straight, because if you think about it, when you put let's say if you take a circle and you put a circle on a surface like this that is tapered, when you lay down the circle, excuse me, it warps the circle and it no longer looks like a circle. It might look like an oval, right? But if you taper it, and the taper follows the not so straightness of your cup, when you put the circle on the cup, it keeps the circle straight so that it maintains its circular look. When you look at it, you know, when you're putting it on, you might see it's oblong, it's not perfect or whatever. But when you put it on the cup, you don't get that. The illusion is that it's a perfect circle. So the purpose of the conical warp is to keep your image straight as it follows the taper of the cup. At least that's what I noticed as I was working on this, because I was working on Tiffany's, and I remember specifically that when I lined up Tiffany's, her name and her title, it was straight. It was completely straight. And once I did the conical warp, it kind of made it go in like a kind of a cone shape. And I could see that while I was working on it, but it's not as noticeable when you're looking at it. So yeah, that's my little, I guess, 2 cents on that. But these are all done. Shabby will be receiving this in a couple of days, and by the time I post this out, she will already be married. So I won't be ruining the surprise. But if you have any questions, as always, feel free to contact me. My contact information is in the description below this video. That includes email, through my website. I do have a phone number you can message me on, or you can just drop a comment under the video and I will be sure to get to it as soon as I can. Y'all have a great day.
This life is a blessing, give thanks for life. We going high. Untitled